Hello everyone, welcome back to the Stitches in STEM YouTube channel. My name is Michaela and this is podcast episode number 35. Feels like it's been quite a while since I last recorded. I don't know what date it was, but it feels like maybe a month. My birthday is at the end of January and my boyfriend's birthday is exactly a week later, so those 2 weekends are usually occupied for me. And then I was in Krakow for a few days. I had some time off work and I decided to go on a little solo trip to Krakow because the flights were very cheap and I had a really nice time. It's such a lovely city. It was my first time going to Poland, and if Krakow is anything to go by, I would love to go and explore some more of the country. I had such a good time. Would highly recommend it if you have the opportunity to go. There are some yarn shops which I visited, but I didn't buy any yarn. I'll link them down in the description box, but I'll talk a bit more about that at the end. Otherwise, I just spent a lot of my time just walking around, going to different cafes and bars. That's really what I like to do on a solo trip. I kind of prefer to save touristy things from when I'm with people, and I do want to go back with my boyfriend, and we'll probably do the touristy things like the salt mines and the Schindler's factory, I think it's called. I did do a tour of Auschwitz, which I just felt was important to do while I was there. You know, it was just kind of felt like I should do it. So I did do that. But otherwise, I just spent a lot of my time walking around. I went to cafes and bars and restaurants. I knit a lot. Like, I did so much knitting and I just had a really nice time. It was lovely. So yeah, I'm back home now, obviously, and I still have some time off work. So I'm still knitting a lot, which has been really, really, really nice. So yeah, let's talk about the projects that I've been working on. I also want to say that it's raining quite heavily. It has rained non-stop for the last 3 weeks, I think. I don't know how the sky hasn't just run out of water at this point. But yeah, if you can hear the rain against the window, I do apologise. There's nothing I can do about it. Despite the fact that it's been a month since I recorded and I've had quite a lot of knitting time these last 2 weeks, I only have 3 projects to talk about today, but I do have quite extensive updates to give you on 2 of them at least. So let's get into that. My first finished object is what I'm wearing, and that's my side bow slipover, which is a pattern by Noelle Knits, or Sarah Antopenkov. This pattern was sent to me by a viewer, so thank you so much to the person who sent me this. As you can see, I got great use out of it and I really love this. The yarn that I used was Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino in the colour Midnight. The pattern gauge is 20 stitches and 10 centimetres, but my gauge was 18 stitches and 10 centimetres. And to compensate for that, I ended up knitting a size down. So I should have knit a size 3 according to the measurements given in the pattern, but I knit a size 2 instead. In the last episode, I think I was working through the first of the 2 double knit ties. I hadn't even attached it to the body at that point. I was still doing the first part of it where you just work a straight double knit band. The double knit ties are kind of constructed in 3 parts. So first you just start working the double knitting on its own, so you cast on a few stitches and you work double knitting back and forth until it's long enough to be one part of the tie. Then you pick up stitches along the edge of the slip over and you continue working the double knit tie while attaching it to the slip over. And once you've done that part, you once again just start working double knitting on its own so that you have the second part of the tie. And then you repeat that for the other side. It sounds tedious, and I certainly thought it would be, but in reality it actually wasn't as bad as I expected it to be. I personally don't mind double knitting, but if you hate double knitting, you're not going to enjoy this pattern, although I do think the final result is worth it. After I first blocked this, I found that it was sitting kind of funny on me. I felt like the front part was flaring forward, almost like sometimes when I knit patterns too short, the lack of bust shaping, because I don't generally do bust shaping, I think causes the front part to always flare out a bit. I don't do bust shaping because even when patterns do have bust shaping options, they always have it for busts that are much larger than mine, and I never meet the criteria for doing bust shaping, even though I know of course I can do it if I want. I don't need the pattern to tell me that I can do it, but I've just always thought I don't need it if the pattern tells me I don't need it. But sometimes I wonder if I should do it anyway. But yeah, in this case I felt like it was kind of flaring forward a bit. I think after wearing it, it has relaxed a bit and it's sitting a lot better. But I will just keep an eye on it, and if I need to, I will just cut into it, add at most an inch, I think will fix it, and then I'll just graft it back together. I have more than enough yarn to do that. I used 265 grams of the heavy merino, and that's just over 5 balls, and I purchased 6 balls. Well, actually it was a Christmas present, so I didn't purchase it, but I got 6 balls, so I have just over half a ball left. I was also kind of playing around with where it sits on the shoulders. Like if I pull it forward a bit, the front part sits a bit better, but it's not supposed to sit that far forward on the shoulders, and the neckline is already, I don't know if you can tell or if you agree, but I think it's quite deep, and when I was pulling it forward it was obviously going even deeper, so it just wasn't a good look. Ultimately, it's very easy to tell where the shoulders should sit on this because the ties on the front and back should be perfectly aligned with each other. So if I had any doubts about whether I was wearing it correctly, about whether I had it sitting on my shoulders properly, I just had to check the ties, and that confirmed to me where it's supposed to sit in the shoulders, and therefore what the neckline is supposed to look like and how long the front is supposed to be. I've also never worn slipovers, at least in my adult life. I don't know if I even wore them as a child or a teenager. I don't remember ever wearing slipovers. I never remember particularly liking them, but I just really like the style of this one, and I wanted to make it work in my wardrobe. So I think there is just an element of getting used to it. Like, I was looking in the mirror and I was like, something looks funny, but it's probably just because I've never worn slipovers and I don't know what I like about them, about, you know, the length that I like, the kind of width and the shoulders that I like. And that's just something that I'm going to have to figure out as I knit more slipovers. I do love the pattern, and the more I see myself in the mirror, the more I like it, the more I want to wear it. If you want to make this pattern, I would say it's a good idea to think about how you choose your size. So it's designed to have 4 inches of positive ease, but positive ease is very difficult to judge when there is literally no fabric on the side of the slipover. And I think in this case, it's probably better to think about how you want it to fit on your shoulders. So, you know, whether you want it to be narrower or wider or kind of even more like a drop shoulder. Like, I've seen some of the project pages on Ravelry where the slipover is actually coming down over the shoulder, and that looks really good as well. For me, I probably wanted it maybe a little bit narrower, but I'm still comfortable with this width, but it is the maximum kind of width that I had in mind for this slipover. There is a lot of flexibility with the open sides. Like, if you want to go down a size, you're not going to have a risk that it just won't fit. It's still going to fit, it will just look different. So I do wonder if I should have gone down even another size, down to the size 1, and that would have given me a little bit of a narrower shoulder, but ultimately I'm pretty happy with how this looks. Again, I feel like I can also put that down to not having ever worn slipovers and not knowing what I like and what I don't like about them. I definitely feel like I've learned a lot about my preferences from this one. With this particular style, I think I would have preferred it a little bit narrower, but again, it does fall within the range that I'm happy with. But for other slipovers, I might not mind the width as well. So I think it just depends on the style. I had talked before about the dye lot difference that I got within my 6 skeins. So there is a dye lot difference on the back panel that you might be able to see in the B-roll footage. It is still visible after blocking. I had a small hope that blocking might blend out the difference, but it didn't. But it doesn't bother me. It's on the back and it's very slight. I had thrown out the ball bands for the first couple of yarn balls that I'd used, including both balls that I used for the back panel. So I was worried that the one that I used for the front panel would be different than the one that I used for the top of the back, and that there would be a big difference in colour along that seam. But just looking at them, I think they are from the same dye lot because I can't see any colour difference. So I think it looks okay, and I think dye lot differences could go a lot worse than they did in this instance. I do prefer to wear this with a long sleeve top, but they're all in the wash at the moment, and I do think the white t-shirt is a bit stark, but for the sake of showing you guys on the podcast, I think it's fine to wear. But yeah, I probably wouldn't wear a white t-shirt with it in everyday wear. Overall, I'm really happy with this project. I had a lot of fun knitting it despite the double knitting. I found that it went faster than I expected, but your mileage may vary with that. That was my only finished object, so we'll move on to whips, and the first whip is the big one. It's my self-drafted Aran jumper, which you can see is looking very well. This is actually still a little bit damp from blocking, so I'm just going to show you for a second and then I'm going to put it back down to continue drying. If you're new here, I'm recreating a cabled Aran jumper that belonged to my granddad, and I'm using Explorer Knits and Fibres Rockies DK in the colour Ava Noir, which is a very dark purple. So I'll show you the back very quickly. There's a lifeline. Back and front. I'll put in some photos as I'm talking about it so that I can show you what I'm talking about. In the last episode, I was working the back yoke and I talked about how I had to restart it. Well, this is deja vu because I had to restart it again. However, this time you can see I've gotten a lot further with it, and yeah, we're finally past the back yoke, I hope. For me, there were 3 big challenges with this jumper that I felt had the biggest potential for ripping back and frogging and recalculating, and I'm still kind of working through a couple of those, but we are getting there. The first challenge was the short row shaping at the back, and that is indeed why I had to restart it since the last episode. The back yoke is shaped with German short row turns, and I was turning 2 stitches after every previous turn. And that basically resulted in a shoulder slope that was very steep. And when I held it up against my back, the bottom of the shaping was actually at my underarm because it was dropping so much. It meant I had 48 rows in that kind of trapezoid shape, and at my row gauge it was just making the trapezoid end at my armpit, and that's not what I wanted. I don't know why I did turns every 2 stitches. I think because originally I was going to shape the back yoke with increases, and every modified drop shoulder pattern that I've made that has shaped the back yoke with increases every 2 rows. So I was thinking German short rows would be the same. So I just switched to German short rows and worked a turn 2 stitches after every previous turn. However, I then looked at other patterns that use German short rows to shape the back yoke, and they use a wide variety of numbers. Some of them were turning 5 stitches after previous turns. So I realized that there was no hard and fast rule for how frequently you should turn with your German short rows. So I did some calculations, and I figured that if I turned 3 stitches after every previous stitch, that would give me a much shallower trapezoid, but not too shallow. So I kind of figured out an optimum depth of that trapezoid shape and how many rows I needed in the trapezoid to achieve that depth. And so I restarted it, turning 3 stitches after every previous turn, and I think the shaping is so much better. It looks a lot more natural. The original one looked very dramatic. You know, I only noticed that it looked steep when I kind of laid it flat. And I posted a picture up on Instagram, which I'll show here, because in that photo I was like, it looks funny, but it looks good, but it looks funny. And then I realized once I held it up to my back that the trapezoid was just far too deep. So I think it looks a lot more natural now, and I'm much happier with it. And importantly, I put in a lifeline so that I could rip it back if I needed to after that point. So that was challenge number 1. I think I ticked that off. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. Challenge number 2 was the armhole shaping. So if you think of a very basic drop shoulder, that's 1 rectangle for the front, 1 rectangle for the back. At some point they join under the arm, but that means that the straight armhole edge on the front and the back is going to be equal to each other. But on those modified drop shoulders, the straight armhole edge on the back is much shorter than the front, because the front, actually I can show you on this. So the front picks up here. So this straight armhole edge from the front is all the way over the shoulder and comes back down and joins under the arm. So I wasn't sure how to figure out how long I needed to knit the back panel before putting it on hold so I could start working on the front. I knew I wanted my armhole to be 40 centimeters, and I realized that I should be basing my measurement off the cast on edge rather than just measuring that straight edge at the armhole. Based on other patterns that I knit, I kind of estimated that I should knit that back panel until it was 22 centimeters, which meant that that straight armhole edge at the back was 12 centimeters. And then I kind of put the armhole shaping on pause because I then needed to work the front, which involved shaping the neckline, and that was challenge number 3. The neckline was more complicated than I thought it would be because I needed to figure out how long to knit each of those shoulder panels straight before starting increases, and how many increases to do. And I needed to do it all so that the neck opening was the right size before ribbing, so that when I added the ribbed collar, it would pull it in to the size that I wanted. And that was really, really difficult to figure out. I won't go into all of the numbers because I'm saving it for the project vlog that I'm currently filming on this, and I don't want to repeat myself too much, so you're just going to have to wait for that if you want to see the details. But it took me a long time to figure that one out. So I worked the left and right fronts. I joined them at the front, and I kind of immediately did the collar. As soon as I'd worked a few rows after joining the left and right at the front, I just worked the collar because I was a little bit nervous about the maths that I'd done, and I wanted to make sure that all the numbers worked out correctly. I wanted to make sure that once I added that ribbed collar that it cinched in enough and it wasn't too tight to get over my head, but it wasn't too loose once on. I'll put in some b-roll footage of me. I think this will be dry by this evening, so I'll record some b-roll footage then and I'll pop it in so you can see the collar. I do think that the collar pulled in the neck hole enough. So actually the neck hole before ribbing, the circumference was like 55 centimeters, which seems huge. But I was looking at other patterns that I've knit, and they all have a neck hole that's kind of, neck hole, is that even the right word? Neck opening. They all have a neck opening that's like around between 50 and 60 centimeters before adding the ribbing. And then once you add the ribbing, it pulls it in quite a lot, and the neck opening then was 35 centimeters, I think. It made a big difference. But yeah, I was happy with how the collar pulled in the neck opening, but I did pick up too many stitches because I didn't really account for the honeycomb panel, which is a much denser gauge than stockinette. If I was picking up a collar around a stockinette jumper, I would pick up 1 stitch in every stitch. but because the honeycomb cinches in the fabric so much, when I picked up one stitch in every stitch, the ribbing at the front and the back, just along that horizontal edge, it flares quite a lot. So I do want to redo that, and I want to make it longer as well. I think I made it 3 centimeters, but I'm going to make it 3.5. For now, I'm happy to move on, because the whole point of me doing that collar was just to see if I had made the neck opening too big at 55 centimeters, and I don't think I have. I think once I add the final collar, it will look good. So I continued working until the front measured 26 centimeters from the shoulder pickup. And again, that's based on other patterns that I've knit. I basically went through 5 or 6 patterns that I've knit and took down the measurements and things that they've all used for my size. And I applied those measurements, or an average of those measurements. Or if there was a pattern that I preferred the fit of, that's the one I went on. And then I joined in the round. I cast on about 2 centimeters of stitches under the arm. So my armhole measures 40 centimeters as I wanted. Remember, 12 centimeters on the back straight edge, 26 centimeters on the front edge, and then 2 centimeters on the bottom under the arm. So I continued working in the round until I finished the skein I was on, and then I blocked it, and here we are now. I do think it's a tiny bit big, but it's still damp, so it's obviously not 100% possible to tell. I was aiming for anywhere between 10 and 15 centimeters of positive ease, and currently it's like 16, 17 centimeters. So yeah, it's a little bit on the bigger side. I might rip it back and take out those underarm stitches. The final pattern that I publish will have underarm stitches, but I think in this version at least, the fabric is drapey and flexible enough that I can get away with removing those underarm stitches. However, I have not made a final decision on that yet, because as I said, it is still damp, so I'm going to wait until it's bone dry, of course, and then I'll measure it again. I am loving working on this. I brought it to Krakow. I also brought a pair of socks, which is my next whip, but I didn't touch them at all. I only worked on this. I only wanted to work on this. It's really surprised me how much I've wanted to work on this, because it's kind of similar to my Dagmar zipper sweater, and I kind of thought that once I finished that, I wouldn't want to do a similar pattern again, but it's been going overall quite positive. Obviously there are some setbacks, but yeah, overall it's been mostly quite positive, which has been a huge motivator for me to keep working on it. And if you're new here, I am planning to publish this as a free pattern. I'd also like to do a video tutorial, so keep an eye out for that. And I'm filming a project vlog, so all of that will come in due course. My next whip I will not spend too long talking about, because it's just a pair of vanilla socks. This yarn is from the Olivia and Oliver Fibres Advent Calendar from 2024. It was a sock set advent calendar, and this is the spring sock set. So the main colour is called a bloom, and it did come with a little blue mini skein, but I decided to use a different colour for the contrast colour from my stash. I prefer to kind of dip into my stash for contrast colours if I can. Just means I can avoid winding up another mini skein and having an awkward amount of a mini skein left over at the end of a pair of socks. Makes it easier to destash mini skeins as well when they're in their original hank. But yeah, so I just used a green yarn from my stash, and I just did 2 rows at the top of the cuff. I've never done this before. I've always kind of wanted to. I know, so crazy. But yeah, I really like how this looks, and the rest of the sock is just in one colour. I think I've finished the foot on both socks. I just need to do the toe now, so hopefully I'll get these finished today. Nothing major to report with these. I think after these, I'm going to take a break from sock knitting. I was going through a real sock knitting phase for a few months. I just kept wanting to knit socks, but I'm no longer in that phase. So I think after these, I'll put socks to the side for a while. It's getting a bit dark in here, but I don't have much more to talk about. So yeah, let's just get through it. Acquisitions, I don't have any yarn acquisitions. As I said, I did go into 2 yarn shops in Krakow. I'll link them down below. They're definitely worth visiting if you're in Krakow, but I just had no desire to buy yarn. I have so much already. Actually, one of them I picked up a Lang yarn. I can't remember what it was. I think it was a yak, maybe yak and cotton or something. Anyway, so I brought it up to the till and I asked her if she had enough. I asked her if she had more balls with it, and she said no. So it was probably for the best. I was maybe a little bit secretly happy that they didn't, because I think it would have been a bit of a guilty purchase if I had bought more yarn when I have so much at home already. So yeah, I didn't buy any yarn. I just bought needles to work the collar on my Aran jumper. That was it. But I have bought 2 books recently. So the first one is a physical book. It's Amy Herzog's Ultimate Sweater book. I bought this to help me with my Aran jumper. But I actually, having read through it very briefly now, I actually don't think it's going to be much help to me for that, but it will be help for other jumpers in the future. This basically gives you guidelines for how to draft your own jumpers, and it covers 4 different constructions. So drop shoulders, raglans, circular yokes, and set-in sleeves. It tells you how to work all of them bottom up, and my jumper is knit top down. Also, when it covers drop shoulders, it doesn't cover that modified drop shoulder construction with the trapezoid shape at the back. And so I just didn't find it to be very useful for that particular project. But I do have another project that I want to cast on that I'm going to use this for. So I'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, I do think it's a useful book. Otherwise, it's got sections on not only drafting a jumper from scratch, but also modifying patterns. So how to modify body shaping, if you want to do waist shaping, if you want to do A-line, or do decreases for the waist shaping, if you want to modify sleeves to do bell sleeves or straight sleeves or tapered sleeves. It goes through all of that, and I do think it's pretty useful at first glance, but I haven't read through it properly. Each of the jumper constructions that are discussed, it tells you how to go about drafting your own version of that, but then it also gives you a very basic pattern that kind of goes through the construction and how what she has said in each chapter applies to that particular pattern. And then at the end, there's a selection of other patterns that use all of those basic constructions, but kind of add more complex elements. Like this one has this kind of offset closure. This one's got these nice sleeve details, this kind of wrap sleeve detail here, which I like. So yeah, I haven't, as I said, read it in detail yet, but I've just kind of flicked through it. I think there's some useful information in there and I want to get some use out of it. So I am going to apply some of the techniques in this to one of my upcoming projects. The other book that I bought, I actually just bought on my Kindle, and it's the Knitting Pattern Writing Handbook by Christina McGrath and Sarah Walworth. And this is for actually writing the patterns. So it's instructions on the kind of language you need to use if you're including charts, how to make charts and make them clear. It talks about tech editing, common pitfalls with pattern writing. It talks about grading. I do think I'll get more use out of that one because I do plan on writing a pattern for the Aran jumper. I haven't read it, front to back yet, but I have flicked through it and I've definitely referred to a few sections kind of here and there, jumping around in it just to read the sections that are relevant to me in any given moment. But yeah, I do think that I'll get a lot of use out of that one. Moving on to plans, I have 2 swatches to show you. One is with a yarn that I've been talking about for the last few weeks, or a few months even. If you've been watching the podcast, you'll recognize this one. This is the Ochre Yarns 306 blend that I got in Australia. It's a merino yak silk blend, and I had originally planned to cast on the Chantal sweater by Morek Knit, and actually a viewer sent me the pattern because it was number 1 in my queue. So thank you so much. I feel very guilty because I'm not going to make that just yet. I do want to make it at some point in the future, but basically I couldn't get gauge, and I also don't think I'm going to have enough yarn. So I'm not going to make it for now, but check your Ravelry inbox because I'll send you a pattern back as a thank you. But yeah, let me talk about the swatches that I made. So the first one, it's a saddle shoulder pattern. So I actually cast on the saddle shoulder. So I actually made the saddle part to use that as my swatch. And I had originally done a swatch on 4mm Chow Gu needles. So they were the stainless steel ones. And my gauge was too big. It was like 23 stitches and 10 centimeters, whereas the pattern gauge is 26 stitches and 10 centimeters. So then I cast this on. This is on 3.5mm Knit Pro needles. So they're the laminated bamboo ones, the multicolored ones. And this gauge is 28 stitches and 10 centimeters, so it was too tight. So then I tried my Knit Pro 4mm needles, which is this swatch down here. And this gauge was 24 stitches and 10 centimeters, so too big again. So I just couldn't get gauge. And the other thing with this one, let me move closer. The other thing with this swatch in particular, let me zoom in, is that my tension's a bit funny. So if you recognize the stitch pattern, this is basically like if you do a slip stitch, heel flap and gusset, it's the same stitch pattern that's used here. And so these kind of more prominent columns are the slip stitch columns, and the ones in between are the knitted columns. And down here, I think the slip stitch columns really stand out against the knitted columns. It's kind of like they're way more forward, and there's more of a kind of a 3D effect. Whereas for some reason up here, the slip stitch columns kind of blend in a lot more with the knit columns. And And like, I didn't do anything differently that I know of. Obviously I must have been tensioning my yarn differently, but the fact that I did that without realizing, and I'm getting this weird kind of, let me show you the full swatch so you can see, I'm getting this weird disparity in the tension, kind of made me concerned for if I actually make this jumper, am I going to end up with, sorry, I'm really close. Yeah, it just kind of made me concerned for if I do cast on this jumper, am I going to end up with patches of weird mismatched tension. Mismatched tension is something that a lot of people actually talk about with this pattern. I looked through some of the Ravelry project pages, and some people had actually frogged, well, one person at least had actually frogged the entire project because when she went from flat knitting to in the round, the tension difference was so stark. I have spotty tension at the best of times, so I thought it was maybe a little bit risky for me to cast this on. And I was also going to be playing yarn chicken, so I had two kind of stumbling blocks that were kind of putting me off casting this on. This yarn, being from Australia, is obviously not going to be the most accessible to me to get my hands on if I run out, so I didn't particularly want to risk running out. And then the fact that I wasn't getting gauge, like, that's not always a huge issue. I'm confident in my ability to, you know, pick a different size based on my gauge, but I wasn't sure then. But then I wasn't sure if the meterage requirements would still apply and if I would end up needing more yarn if my gauge was too tight, etc., etc. So there was just too many kind of factors contributing to this potentially not working out, and I didn't want to risk casting it on. I do really like the textured look of the Chantal sweater, so I worked up a swatch of broken rib. This is two different needle sizes, so this one here is on a 4mm needle and this one's on a 3.5mm needle. I'll just show them back here. There is very little difference between the two, but I'm probably going to go with the 3.5mm just for a slightly denser fabric. My gauge is 21 stitches and 10 centimeters, and from this I'm going to self-draft a V-neck jumper, and I'm going to use the book by Amy Herzog that I mentioned to help me with that. I'm going to do a raglan because I particularly like the raglan lines on the Chantal V-neck sweater. I really like how that sweater looks overall, so I'm going to try and replicate this kind of textured V-neck look, but not using that slip stitch pattern. I'm going to use my broken rib pattern. The Amy Herzog book, as I mentioned, all the constructions are described in a bottom up format, so that's what I'm going to do. And she also talks about how the raglan construction isn't very structured and therefore it's better to do it seamed. So I've decided I'm going to go all in and I'm going to do it bottom up and seamed. So that'll definitely be a change, but I want to do it right. I want to do it the right way. So I'm going to do a project vlog on it because I thought it would be interesting to show how I'm using this book to make this jumper and as a kind of real-time practical review of the book. The other swatch I have isn't finished yet, but it's quite large, as you can see. This yarn is also from Australia. It's from Great Ocean Road Woolen Mills, and it's their Summer Fiesta 4-ply. So it's a merino linen blend, fingering weight. I think it's quite a light fingering weight. It feels similar to the Knitting for Olive fingering weight, which is a light fingering. I had previously swatched this on 3mm needles, and my gauge was 22 stitches and 10 centimeters, but it just felt a bit open. Especially for fingering weight yarn, I would kind of prefer a little bit of a denser fabric, but I also didn't know what I wanted to knit with it, so I kind of just put it to the side. I recently came across the Daily Pullover, which is a pattern by Pearl Soho. I saw someone post a version on Reddit and I just fell in love with it, so I added it to my favourites. It's knit with a fingering weight yarn and the gauge is 24 stitches and 10 centimeters, and I figured that if I could get a 24 stitch gauge on this yarn, that would be perfect for it. So I've now swatched on 2.75mm needles. I haven't finished my swatch yet, I haven't even blocked it yet, but my pre-blocked gauge is 23 stitches and 10 centimeters. So I would like it to be a little bit tighter again, but I don't want to go down another needle size because that would mean going down to a 2.5mm needle. And I don't think I want to knit a full jumper on a 2.5mm needle. I think what I might do is I'll block this. I'll see what it comes out at naturally, like maybe it will stretch vertically itself, but if it doesn't, I'll block it again and I'll try and stretch it vertically and see if I can make it narrower that way. Either way, my next project will definitely be a stockinette in the round project because once I cast on that pink, the V-neck jumper, I'll have two self-drafted jumpers on my needles, which is a lot. This is what happens to me when I have time off work. I'm like, I need to apply my brain somewhere, so I start doing these self-drafted projects. Once I go back to work, I'm going to regret this, but whatever. We'll cross our bridge when we come to it. So that is everything for today. Thank you so much for making it this far in the video. Thank you so much for tuning in the first place. If you have any questions about anything I talked about, please do leave them in the comments and I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as possible. Everything that I talked about will be linked in the description box, so that's all patterns, yarns. I'll link those 2 yarn shops in Krakow that I went to. As always, I also have my yarn shop directory linked down below and my affiliate link for the Woolly Thistle. So if you'd like to purchase anything from the Woolly Thistle and support my channel at the same time, you can do so through that link. Otherwise, thank you again for watching and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.